What is up, everybody? Go ahead and say hey in the chat on the right side if you're watching on a computer. Let me know where you're tuning in from. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. But while we're waiting, got to get that Insta story. Hope everyone's day is going well. What is going on, people? Welcome, Ethan. Welcome, Gear of the Week. I'm glad you guys are here. Ethan, it's awesome that you're coming in from the West Coast. Gear of the Week, where are you coming in from? All right, so I'm going to try and start this pretty promptly right at 2. We got just another minute. Let people get in. All right. Hope everyone's week is going pretty well so far. We're just hanging in there. You know, it's me and the pup just hanging out. Living our best life. I don't know why that got goofed up, but there we go. We have the screen fixed. Oh, Brian, what's going on? Your name tag threw me off. And then I just have to boop. We had to do a little reformatting. There we go. All right. It is now 2 o'clock, which means we are going to get started. Thank you guys for all tuning in. As you know, my name is Simon, and today I'm going to kind of give you guys the PowerPoint presentation, the talk that I give when I've been asked to come do these live presentations, talking about what it's like working with NGOs in developing countries, what are some of the things I run into, some stories from the field, how I got started in all of this. So it's going to be a little different because obviously I can't see you guys, but we're going to do the best we can with it. So we're going to jump into this right now, and I'm going to switch to where you guys can see what's on my screen. All right, there we go. So I'm just going to start this out, and I'm going to play you guys a little bit of a demo reel, something that I've put together that kind of gives you an idea of all of the things I've done over the past couple of years, 5 or 6 years or so. Actually, it's more like 7 or 8 now, which time flies, apparently. So here we go. Oh. All right, so that just gives you a glimpse into a few of the projects that I've been working on. You saw glimpses of DR Congo, Senegal, Burkina Faso, Thailand. So you got glimpses of a little bit here and there all over the place, just to kind of get a little bit of types of things that I've been working on. And there's still more stuff that's in the works, but I can't quite put it into there yet. That being said, if you have any questions during this whole thing, be sure to just leave a comment in the chat. I would be glad to answer it. I might save it if it's a longer question for the end, but I will be sure to answer it while we're here. That being said, I'm going to start back at the beginning of where all of me going overseas was, and that would be circa 2007. This was my freshman year of college. I grew up traveling, but it was never for this type of work. It was always family vacations, things like that. We went to a lot of different states. We would do 2-week road trips. We went to Australia and some things like that. Growing up, it was all more of family vacation, that kind of thing. Whereas this in 2007 was my first time really going overseas for this purpose. And these 3 photos right here are the ones that are from that trip. The one in the top center is me standing across a bay from the 2nd largest mosque in the world in Casablanca, Morocco. We had a long layover there. This top left is me sitting on a crocodile or an alligator. I forget the difference. But that was in Burkina Faso. And then down below is actually me with the group that I was with playing a concert in Burkina Faso. We actually ended up having a little music group called Les Ambassadeurs, and we actually played on the radio. We played a concert and all sorts of stuff, and it was just because we had a bunch of musicians on the trip with us. And this was all well before I touched a camera, but it was opening the doors for me to want to do this type of work, whether it was camera or not camera. Really didn't matter. I did always have a camera with me, but it was always that classic point and shoot that you couldn't really do much with. Photos were terrible compared to what I can take now, but it was still a camera. Then 2008, my dad and I went to Gabon, and 2009 ended up going to Indonesia, where that kind of opened more of seeing a whole different part of the world, seeing different types of things. Really kind of made me want to do more of that type of work. And then in the fall of 2009, I was at Nyack College, where I had to take a fine arts class where the only elective that was available around my schedule was Intro to Digital Photography. So this is not something I have been doing my whole life like a lot of people you hear. This is something that's fairly recent in the grand scheme of things. I've only been doing this for essentially the last third of my life, which is still a large percentage of the time, but it's grand scheme of things, not that much time. So basically what happened was after I took Intro to Digital Photo, I fell in love with having a camera. And at the time I was working for my dad's engineering firm, where I would essentially turn all of my overtime money into camera equipment. So I was investing into getting more stuff, but this was all still no plans on this being a profession. This was just a hobby. I enjoyed it as a hobby. And so in 2011, my dad and I went to Indonesia to build a rock climbing wall. And that was really where the camera started to go overseas with me for the first time. And that was when I started to just take photos. Again, just being a hobbyist. I was not that great of a photographer at the time. But the camera was with me. I was taking photos and really starting to grasp concepts of photography beyond just taking what I had to take for class. I was really starting to learn what interested me, that kind of thing. I was really pretty much taking photos of anything and everything at that time. And then that trip turned into me just going back to work, and fast forward about 7 months and I decided to quit working for my dad and actually moved to Taipei, Taiwan for about 6.5 months, where I worked with a coffee shop and church plant that was doing photography, video, that kind of thing. That was really where I started to do video. And so that literally like the start of me doing video was summer of 2012. And that's this photo on the right with a bunch of my friends from Taiwan. That was a fantastic little time. Originally, my plan was that I was going to be there for about 15 months. However, I realized after about 4 that living in a major city was not for me. And I decided that I was going to move back home and go back to upstate New York and go kind of overseas on a more short-term basis, shorter trips, that kind of thing. But again, I still had no intention of that being my full-time basis. So it was one of those things that it just never, coming home, I never had a plan for it to be a full-time gig. Excuse me, I need a sip of tea. If you asked me when I was in high school or college, I had no interest in working for myself. I was one of those people who always wanted to just work for someone else and have a job that let me pay bills and then I could go do other fun things on the side. So it just was one of those that didn't quite pan out. But when I came home, I landed right before Hurricane Sandy, and if anyone remembers, the Northeast was ravaged by that, and so I ended up doing construction, basically doing demolition, clear out of homes for about a month and a half after Hurricane Sandy, which led to the opportunity for me to go back to Burkina Faso in January of 2013 with my dad. And that is what led to one of the most interesting trips of my life. This was one of those trips that nothing went according to plan. My dad is from a Jewish family, and he was doing a Passover Seder, and the people we were supposed to be working with had a death in their family. So what ended up happening was other people with the organization helped him do that. I ended up going out and basically just driving around Burkina Faso with 2 other guys and one of their Burkina Bay co-workers, guy that they hired all the time that was a welder, and basically just checked on projects. We spent, I don't even want to know how many hours driving around the country. That being said, we did run into quite a few issues. What you're seeing in this photo is actually us at about 6 a.m. We had to empty our trailer, flip it over, and re-weld all of the springs onto the trailer because the washboard roads that we had driven on were so bad that it literally broke all of the connection points to keep basically the wheels on the trailer. Needless to say, it was not a good situation. That was also the same trip out where I got food poisoning from a roadside vendor, and I was doing double duty trying to both take photos and also deal with food poisoning. But one of the positives that came out of that trip was I was able to sit in the car and talk with these guys about what their things that they were doing were successful, what they were struggling with, what they needed more of, that type of thing, which allowed me to grasp kind of what their biggest needs were. And with that, I was able to start to understand that a lot of what they were struggling with was that they're not photographers. They are contractors, they are teachers, they do that kind of work that has nothing to do with marketing. And they were struggling to get people's attention where they were taking photos, but they weren't enough because in the US, back then, millions of photos are uploaded daily. Now it's billions of photos are uploaded daily. And so if you don't have a quality photo, it's not going to get people's attention, especially when you're trying to ask them for a whole lot of money. And so one of their biggest frustrations with fundraising was that they did not have enough money or enough good photos and video content to really grasp people's attention and suck people in and all of that good stuff. So what ended up happening was I just kept falling in love with this type of thing and realizing that this is what I wanted to do more of in the long term. And this is one of those photos that sticks out in my mind when people say, why do I do what I do? And that's because if you look closely at this photo, especially right here, it's a very unique way of riding a bike, to say the least. And so that's one of the things that just grabbed my attention, was how interesting it was the way this girl found a way to ride a bicycle. And at the same time, I was learning about how they actually drill wells for clean water, because we were at a stop where they were checking on a different organization that was drilling a well for them. And so it's one of those things where it lets me see a little bit of what's going on, but not a whole ton. That trip led to a turnaround about 3 or 4 weeks later, where I actually went back and jumped on a well drilling crew, and as you can see, it was a little dirty. This is me up here on the truck. This was in March of 2013. It was about 100 to 120 degrees every day, and we were working on a big metal rig pretty much all day long. Long story short, I was trying to do double duty where I was documenting it, and at the same time I was working on the rig, because everyone had to put time in on actually doing the manual labor. It was a blast, it was exhausting, and I learned a ton about all of that. And I was able to get a couple good images that I still think are great images today, but the biggest thing was I was really starting to learn a lot of what kind of things they're working on, what goes on, how to really try and tell the stories of these people. To give you an idea of how hot it was, this is a 9-volt battery, and I had actually pulled this out of my bag looking like this. As you can see, it has seen better days. I actually never got a chance to use that battery because of the fact that it exploded in my bag. And then after that trip, the water stuff really just kind of took hold and took my interest. And in 2014, I had the opportunity to go back and document a solar irrigation system being installed. I'm actually standing on the water tower for the solar irrigation system. And if you look closely, you can see these rows right here where there are spigots that were put out into this garden. As you can see, this is not a well grown out garden. You've got a ton of space over here that is not actually being used. There was a bunch of space over here that wasn't being used. And the reason for that is the students actually had to draw all of the water for watering their plants from this hand dug well. And every student had to draw a certain amount of water each day. There was actually stones on the well that you use as your counter. And this trip led to one of those moments that I will never forget. The women that are in this photo were probably like 15 and 17 or 18, somewhere in there. You guys are not seeing the pointer. Well, okay, we'll go back. All right, so, all right, I know why. But anyway, okay, so in the bottom right of the corner, you'll see the blue spigot and the trough kind of runs through the frame on this photo. That would give you a little perspective of it. So going back forward, the women in this photo were probably 15 and 18. Don't remember their exact ages, but they had never used an actual faucet before. They'd always had like a well of some sort that they were working for their water, whereas this was actually them getting water, just turning a spigot. So being able to teach these women how to use a faucet that in America, we're so accustomed to that type of thing. Just, you don't even remember when you learned how to use a faucet. You just remember at one point you started turning the faucet on for yourself. I've asked that question, especially with like the younger audiences. I always ask that question, and I've never had someone know like the exact day that they can remember when they learned how to use a faucet. In 2015, I had the chance to mix things up and actually go help a organization that works in anti-human trafficking. And this was me shooting a bunch of time lapses, and one of the guys I was working with left me up on a bridge to shoot some traffic. And of course, a white guy gets a lot of attention, so the cops got called. Thankfully, we got it all worked out and I didn't get arrested or anything, but it was an interesting moment, to say the least. Trying to explain time-lapse to Thai police when you don't speak any of their language was an interesting language barrier that thankfully help was just a phone call away, but still not the easiest. And this project was me just creating assets for the organization to use that they had some in-house people working, but they needed some extra help, so I flew out for a few weeks to help them with that. And this all led into some of my biggest work to date. In 2017, I had the opportunity to go to DR Congo with E4 Project. They are an incredible organization that I absolutely love working with, and this was our bag build out. One of the crazy things with this project was we had to fly in a bush plane to get in, and we had 200 pounds of bag weight for, Brian, this was before Google Translate, just so you're aware. This was back in 2015 where we didn't have that option. So back to DR Congo. We had 200 pounds of bag weight, and the bags that you are seeing in this photo led to a grand total of 197 pounds. We were like just in the nick of weight, but it was one of those situations where we had to bring a bunch of redundant content or a bunch of redundant gear for if something broke, when something broke. We had to be ready because there was no way we were going to get a piece of replacement gear. We didn't know exactly what we were running into as well, so we didn't know how many cameras we would need for certain situations. Plus, we were shooting both stills and video. So we were doing a lot, to say the least. And to give you guys an idea of just how remote we were, in the bottom left corner, you will see the kind of like a triangle of grass. That is the end of the runway where we got dropped off by the bush plane. And in the center of frame is the actual hospital where you can kind of see solar panels on the green or teal roof. That whole little complex is the hospital, and that is in Nebabongo, DR Congo. Try and say that 10 times fast. Good luck. And yeah, so they have a ton of stuff going on out there. This is a community where the hospital and the local church are really driving growth in the community, and the hospital employs something like 80 to 100 people. Then they're also working on doing some social enterprise to build the economy in the area and some stuff like that. So they've really got a lot going on that they're trying to do. And so we were there because E4 Project and their development director in the US are trying to increase some of their opportunity. Things like when we were there, their truck was a 1982 Land Rover that when we were there, the transmission was sitting in the front seat, and we ended up borrowing a brand new Land Cruiser. They have pig farm. They're trying to start a coffee plantation. The hospital itself just needs materials and funds and stuff like that. So really trying to do a lot of different stuff. And so we were there just creating a bunch of fundraising content. And we went everywhere in this area, capturing all sorts of interviews, talking to different people that are involved, learning about different things. One of the other things was that they were actually trying to build a brand new elementary school. And this is me flying the drone, thinking that we'd be fine to just throw it up and get a couple shots, not realizing that I would not only empty the elementary school, but I had also emptied the high school that was right next door. And if you look at the back of the frame, the little mud huts are actually what the elementary classrooms were at the time. So it was one of those situations where they wanted to really step things up. And it was also one of the coolest opportunities because Dan, oh, excuse me, Dan, who's the development director for E4, took a video that we made, and it was a fairly simple video, but showed it at a church, basically showing what they were trying to do, how much money they needed, and was able to just get a pretty substantial amount. I think they funded the $15,000 that they needed left in like 2 or 3 weeks. So it was really cool to see them be able to just take something and really quickly turn it around, and they were able to finish the school, and about 8 months later they actually opened the school, and the students are now in a nice building where they have 6 classrooms. And yeah, so it's just cool to see stuff like that actually happening, and knowing that content that I created helped with that. One of the other things that's interesting in DR Congo is because of the remote nature of where they are. So if you look back, you can tell that we're in a pretty dense area. And so one of the things is they don't actually drill for water because you can't get a drill rig in. But one of the benefits of being in that type of climate is you actually have a lot of water because you have rain for most of the year. So they have a lot of freshwater springs, and these freshwater springs are able to be protected to provide cleaner water. It's not necessarily purified water, but it's cleaner. And so they're able to do a lot with it, but for a lot lower cost than it would be to drill a well. And so we made this little video just to give you guys an idea of what it is like actually at one of these little springs. So that was how they get clean water. And to give you guys an idea of the difference of protecting a freshwater spring to drilling a well for clean water, it's about $750 to protect a spring. It's about $7,000 in Burkina Faso and Mali to drill a well for clean water. Oh, excuse me. So it's a very drastic difference in price, which allows you to let your money go a lot further in a place like DR Congo. And again, just showcasing how remote we were, this was a pygmy village that we went to where they also have a protected freshwater spring. And one of the cool things with this village was they, in the season before, or the malaria season before they got the protected spring, they had 43 kids go to the hospital with malaria that needed treatment. And afterwards, after they protected the spring, it actually dropped to 0. And so being able to see that kind of a difference was really awesome in person. And it was crazy driving out to this village because as we got more remote, we realized that the road got narrower and narrower because cars and trucks never actually went out there. And talking with the hospital director, they apparently only see a car in some of these places like once every 4 to 6 months, which is kind of mind-blowing. And yeah. Which while I was doing all of those projects, I was actually building my production company in upstate New York. Ended up having a pretty great studio space, and again, serving a lot of nonprofits domestically. While my heart has always been overseas, you've got to do things to pay bills as well. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to have this space where I was serving various clients for things like economic development, people with disabilities, cerebral palsy, that kind of thing. And it led me to some incredible opportunities like this, which is a climbing wall, which is at a facility that is equine therapy. And they also have the first fully handicapped accessible high ropes course in the US. It's pretty interesting and unique place that does a lot of good for people. And we were just highlighting all of the unique things that they do. And this is where I realized how authentic content can go viral, because you just never know how people are going to respond. And so I'm going to play a quick video from this right now.
The name of the Root Farm comes from our founder, Alice Root, but really has so many more meanings. When you think about roots, roots are the foundation from which things grow. And the Root Farm is creating transformative opportunities from which people can grow and expand to become the best that they can be.
The Root Farm's changed my life in multiple ways.
When I interact with people now, I'm sitting up straight and I'm looking them more in the eye.
It just makes such a phenomenal difference in her ability to just participate in regular life.
She just gets better and better every week we come. We see this kind of breakthroughs all the time with all the kids and adults we work with.
This is the reason I'm here, is to do this. The people up here are very friendly.
They treat you like they're your family walking through the door.
They're great people.
The staff here is really good at figuring out how to motivate the children, how to keep them engaged.
I felt like part of the Root Farm from the very first day.
I was hooked from the very start.
I love working up here. It's really exciting.
It doesn't feel like work. I enjoy being here.
We can achieve anything at the Root Farm.
So when we launched that video, it was with a full rebrand of the organization, and we, on this video alone, had something like 250,000 views in a matter of 2 weeks in a 50-mile radius around Utica, where I was at the time. Needless to say, that helped me understand a lot about just creating and using authentic stories and people's actual lives to make movements for nonprofit organizations. And this was also part of what started the transition to where I really wanted to focus on working with NGOs more in the overseas world, which this in a way led to an opportunity with one of my best friends. This is my buddy Paul, and at the time he was in Senegal. And when I say best friends, we go way back. This was back in summer camp days. But anyways, he was based in Dakar, Senegal, and working in a village, basically trying to help them create educational opportunities, because the kids in this village didn't have the opportunity to use a computer in high school. They were still, everything was pen and paper. As you can see, there's not really the classroom that you'd think of in the US. And when these kids graduate from high school, they want to go on to university, but in university, you're expected to know how to use a computer. So one of the things he was working on is trying to build a library media center where they can train kids on how to use a computer in this village, so that way they have a better chance at being successful in university. And it's something that he's still working on, but he actually ended up having to relocate. So he's not able to do as much with it as he was at the time, but it's just another avenue of just trying to help improve lives in developing countries, which is my end goal for a lot. This led to another opportunity going back into clean water in Burkina Faso, where I was documenting the installation of some manual irrigation systems and kind of documenting just the impact that an irrigation system can have on a community. These are just some photos that we grabbed while we were there. But these are kids that are getting to work on helping us prepare our irrigation system for testing. One of the cool things about this is, again, cost difference of different things. To install a solar irrigation system costs about $20,000 US. To install the manual pump irrigation system is only $2,500, and there's only one moving part on it, which you can repair locally, versus a solar system, which requires importing parts, usually things along the lines of you either have to go to a capital, and it's a lot more expensive because they don't have a lot of money in a lot of these places. So making it affordable for someone to repair something like a PVC pipe burst, like that kind of thing, is easy for them to fix, whereas a massive solar panel goes down is not as easy of a fix. So here we've got the irrigation system that is similar to the solar system, but it just requires manual pumping to get the water up into the tower. That was really what our goal was from this trip. And this was my way of trying to show just the impact that solar can have. So the green in the image is a garden that's in the Sector 30 of Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. Ouagadougou is the capital. And this is a system that is based off of a solar array. And it's completely employed, and the garden is taken care of by people that are widows or handicapped, which were typically a people group in that country that is thought of as a lesser people group. So this was an opportunity for them to actually make money and have a job, and their family members ended up thinking of them in a higher way because of the fact that they were able to get a job, which is an awesome opportunity for these people. And then the produce that they would grow is actually sold to a lot of the high-end Western restaurants in Ouaga. So it's a cool way to see that actually turn out. And to go to a before and after, this was the same water tower that I was talking about from 2014, that, as you can see here, this is the 2014 photo where you've got a lot of dead space in the background. And while this is overgrown because they had already done their harvest and they were letting it grow out for a little bit, you can see that there's a lot more green in general around the whole entire area, whereas this is just minimal growth on it as possible. Yeah. And you can also tell that they hadn't used the actual hand dug well because it was all truly overgrown around that. If you guys have any questions at any time, leave it in the chat. I would be glad to answer them. I haven't seen any real questions pop up yet. All right, so irrigation systems. I also was able to, for this project, get a little beta on Google Earth Studio. So this is the irrigation video from Burkina Faso.
Sitting in sub-Saharan West Africa, Burkina Faso is a landlocked country with incredibly happy people, vibrant culture, and spicy food. Burkina typically has a 9-month dry season, during which many water sources become unavailable. This leads to widespread food scarcity and malnourishment. Hand-dug and drilled wells are the most common water sources found. Some areas have solar-powered pumps on wells, and a few of these even have irrigation systems attached, which eases the workload of the people tending to the land. While solar is an amazing resource, it is also extremely expensive to install and tough to maintain without having parts easily accessible locally. In 2016, a manual pump irrigation system was installed as a proof of concept to see how a village would take advantage of this type of system. After quite a bit of work figuring out exactly how to put it all together, the system was a hit. This allowed the village to grow vegetables in their garden through the entire dry season. While this system requires more work than solar, it allows a village to move more water further distances from the well without having to carry it. The spigots allow hoses to be attached, which can move water upwards of 100 to 150 feet from the well on some installations. This not only allows a village to continue growing crops throughout the dry season, but it also lets them start their seeds for their harvest season crops. Manual irrigation systems are a very viable solution in Burkina Faso. At just $2,500 versus the $20,000 it costs for a solar system, the installation alone is a fraction of the cost. It is also entirely made up of locally sourced parts and can be easily repaired by a local plumber for under $50 US. Currently, there are 9 irrigation systems installed in villages outside Dedugu, with plans for another 32 to be installed in the near future. For more information, visit engageburkina.com.
So yeah, this was again one of those times when we're working in a very hot climate. This was March of 2018, or no, sorry, November. Yeah, November of 2018. So it was still hot, but it wasn't quite the 120. I think it was only about 105. Still toasty, very, very toasty. And so this is just a glimpse of what it takes to pull off these kinds of things. And getting a little gear nerdy, in case there's any gearheads in the room. A lot of times when I'm working overseas, I actually prefer to use a glide cam over something like a Ronin or a Ronin S because of the fact that there's no battery on it. Oh, excuse me. A lot of times when I am in these types of situations, I don't know what my power situation is going to be for charging equipment. So a lot of times I'm trying to carry as few batteries as possible, which will allow me to have less stuff I have to charge so I can have my power source go further. In this project was actually similar. I went in expecting to be able to tap into this large battery bank on the solar system that was installed in 2014 because we were staying at the school where that actually lives. Got there to find out that something had not been working right, that needed to get fixed, that the batteries were not communicating with the solar, so it was only pumping during sunlight, it wasn't actually charging the batteries. Did not help me one bit when I had to charge batteries at night and there was no sun. So what ended up happening was myself and Sean, who was with me, had to adapt and use like certain equipment more, certain equipment less, just to try and reserve battery a little bit. We were able to pretty much use whatever we needed. Thankfully, we weren't shooting too heavily, but still conscious decisions that you have to think about. And not having to charge a gimbal battery would just make life a whole lot easier. As you can see, we are doing all sorts of things to try and get the shot. I was trying to get a little bit of a top down, but I didn't want to be crazy high like the drone to get some photos of the actual digging going on at the irrigation system. This was an interesting project, and this opened the door to my next project, which was in Ethiopia last November. And this was a doozy of a project. This was working with an organization called Yazalolem Minch Project, and this is just part of our gear. This was most of our gear, but it wasn't all of it. And this was a 3-man crew, which was the biggest crew that I've taken on one of these projects. It's about as big as I want to get as far as crew, because I like to be light and nimble and be able to be discreet getting in and out of places. It just makes life a lot easier. That being said, we were trying to film 7 videos and get a small stills library done in 11 days, which is not a lot of time. Plus, I had to get some behind the scenes content for some companies that had loaned gear, that kind of thing. So we were trying to capture a lot of content in not much time. But one of the cool things is Nasibu, who is the director of the organization and one of the founders, really grasped what we were trying to do and was able to bring their perspective of how they wanted it to be shown. And one of the things that I'm really trying to do more of is encapsulate how the local leadership wants their story to be told, instead of just forcing my story or my thoughts onto a project, really trying to grasp what they're trying to do and how they're saying it. And it may be kind of a medley of how they're trying to say it with kind of my approach to it. But it's one of those things that you never know exactly how it's going to be until you get there. So trying to have an open mind and understand that things are going to change very rapidly. This exact moment, Nasibu was making fun of me because I was too happy to go photograph, and apparently they were trying to serve us coffee, which is delicious. So Yazlalem Minch Project is a youth, orphan and at-risk youth organization. They run a preschool in 2 cities, or Addis Ababa and then 1 sub-city. Then they run in 2 sub-cities their schooling program for older kids. And basically they're trying to help kids stay in school from preschool all the way through university with things like school tuition, uniforms, helping supply food, helping supply like hygiene products, that kind of stuff. I might do a live video going into this project a little more in depth, but I wanted to touch on this because it was a newer project, and show you guys a little glimpse into what's going on there, because this was a good one. And this is a hygiene distribution day, as you can see, or a hygiene product distribution day. Blah. So they've got a lot of stuff going on. And one of the things that this project really opened my eyes, like I'd seen a lot of pollution and a lot of haze in Africa because of dust in the past, not necessarily because of traffic. And being in and around Addis Ababa, our guest house was up on a hill and you could see across Addis. And this photo was actually part of a time lapse, which really made me realize just how bad pollution is in our environment. The pollution in Addis Ababa was so bad that even if I was shooting at like f8, f9, where it should be tack sharp, it always just had this softness to it because it was just hazy. Like no matter what time of day it was, no matter whether like rain, whatever, like there was just this like haze. And so that started to like pull some things in my mind about how do we get pollution. And that's a question that I'm still asking myself because this is a newer thought process as this project just happened. But yeah, I kind of wanted to touch that in because it is something that's been on my mind, and you never know exactly how it's going to impact your thought process and how you approach projects in the future. So yeah, that is what I got. That is my history. I'd love to answer some questions for you guys. I'm going to give you guys a second to type them in the chat. Yeah, ask whatever questions you'd like. Nothing? No questions? No one's got any questions? All right, well, I guess I'm going to end this here. Feel free to hit me up on Instagram. That's probably the easiest one to shoot me a message. But that's, yeah, follow me on Instagram. If you have any questions, hit me up there. That's going to be nice and easy. Other than that, have a great day, guys. See you guys on the next one.